Hi, this is Terry, and on this video, we're going to be talking about exponents. So the first thing we're going to look at with exponents is what we call the product rule. So the product rule is just multiplying. So when we're looking at this, we have an x cubed times an x to the fifth. So what we want to do is we want to be able to multiply those x's together. Well, when we multiply variables that are the same, all we're going to do is add their exponents. So when we look at our problem here, x cubed times x to the fifth, we're going to write down just one x, and then we're just going to add the exponent. So it'd be like 3 plus 5. So we can even simplify more. If we add those two together, we get 3 plus 5 is 8. So our answer to this problem is x to the 8th power. All right, so let's look at one more that might be a little bit more. So we have x to the 5th, y squared, and then we have x to the 3, y to the 6. Okay, so as we're looking at this guy, we notice right off the bat that we have a multiplication problem because there's not a plus or a minus between them, so everything is multiplied. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're multiplying the same variables together. So let's underline here. We have an x to the fifth, and we also have an x to the third. And then we have a y to the 2 and a y to the 6. So we need to make sure that we're keeping our variables together, okay? So let's look at those x's. We have x, and we have an x to the 5 and an x to the 3. So we're just going to add those exponents. So it would be 5 plus 3. And then we're going to do the same thing with the y. We have a y to the 2 and a y to the 6. So we're just going to add those exponents, 2 plus 6. So let's go ahead and finish this problem out, and we can say that x to the 5 plus 3 would just be x to the 8, and y to the 2 plus 6 would be y to the 8. So our answer here is x to the 8, y to the 8. All right, so let's look at another problem here. We're going to go to the power rule this time, and we're going to look at something that looks kind of like this. We're going to say x to the third, and then all of that in parentheses to the 4th power. So here we're going to use what's called the power rule because we no longer have two x's. We just have an x there to an exponent that's then all of that to another exponent. So when we see this, we're going to use what's called the power rule, and we are just going to multiply the two exponents together. So let's rewrite this a little bit. So it'll be like x to the 3 times the 4. So it's all still in the exponent, but this time we're multiplying. So if we continue to work that problem on out, we would have x, and 3 times 4 is 12. And so x to the 12th would be our answer. Okay, let's look at one more kind of like it. We're going to have 2 to the x to the 5th power, y to the 4 to the, and all of that's going to be to the 3rd power. Okay, so as we're looking at this, it looks a little different because we have multiple things inside our parentheses, and we have that little 3 outside the parenthesis. And if you remember before we talked about the distributive property, that little 3 is actually going to distribute to all 3 terms inside of there. So we're going to set this up a little differently to make it a little easier. So what we're going to do is we're just going to bring down each term that was inside the parenthesis. So we have an x to the 5th, and then this guy goes over here. We're just going to put y to the 4th. And we're just going to put them back in parentheses just like they were. Okay, so we have what's inside the parentheses before. We now have just separated, but they're still multiplied just like they were inside the parentheses. The only thing missing is that little 3 on the outside. And remember, I said it has to distribute. So it's going to go to each one of those terms that we wrote down because he's outside the parentheses of all of that. So now we're going to relook at this. So now we have 2 to the 3rd power. So you can type that in your calculator, or you can say that's 2 times 2 times 2, which would be 8. Okay, then we're going to look and we have x to the 5 times, or x to the 5 and the 3, right? It's all those powers. And so when we do that, remember, this is the power rule. So it's like they're multiplied between. So we're going to say that this is x, and it's going to be 5 times 3, which would be 15. And then we have the y, and again, here we have two numbers basically in the exponent side by side. So they're multiplied together. We have that power rule. And so we say 4 times 3 is 12. So now we look at our problem. We have 8, x to the 15, y to the 12. And that is completely simplified. All right, so let's look at one more here. This is going to be the 0 power. This might be your favorite because when I put something to the 0 power, like 5 to the 0 rule tells me that anything to the 0 power is just 1. Great, isn't it? All right, so let's try another one. So if we say -5 to the 0 power, that is just 1. Anything to the 0 power. What if I said, let's try this one. We could say 2xy squared to the 0 power equals, all of that's together inside the parenthesis, so that 0 is outside, so it is just 1. Okay, let's try one more. What if I said -5, but the negative's outside the parenthesis, and the 5's inside the parenthesis? Now what? Well, your gut instinct may say, oh, it's just 1. Everything to the 0 power is 1. And this is true to a sense. The 5 to that 0 power, because that 0 just touches those parentheses, that is a 1. But we also have this negative right here that's outside the parenthesis. That 0 doesn't go to that negative. So we have to put that negative in front. So this becomes a -1.